Hill House, whatever the cause, has been unfit for human habitation for upwards of 20 years. What it was like before then, whether its personality was moulded by the people who lived here, or the things they did, or whether it was evil from the start, are all questions I cannot answer. Naturally, I hope that we will all know a good deal more about Hill House before we leave. No one knows even why some houses are called haunted. What else could you call Hill House? He demanded. Well, disturbed perhaps, leprous, sick. Any of the popular euphemisms for insanity. A deranged house is a pretty conceit. There are popular theories, however, which discount the eerie, the mysterious. There are people who will tell you that the disturbances I'm calling psychic are actually the result of subterranean waters or electric currents or hallucinations caused by polluted air. Atmospheric pressure, sunspots, earth tremors all have their advocates among the skeptical. People, the doctor said sadly, are always so anxious to get things out into the open where they can put a name to them, even a meaningless name, so long as it has something of a scientific ring. He sighed, relaxing, and gave them a quizzical smile. A haunted house, he said. Everyone laughs. I found myself telling my colleagues at the university that I was going camping this summer. I told people I was participating in a scientific experiment, Theodora said helpfully, without telling them where or what, of course. Presumably your friends feel less strongly about scientific experiments than mine. Yes, the doctor sighed again. Camping, at my age. And yet in that they believed, well. He straightened up again and fumbled with his side, perhaps, for a yardstick. I first heard about Hill House a year ago from a former tenant. He began by assuring me that he had left Hill House because his family objected to living so far out in the country, and ended by saying that in his opinion the house ought to be burned down and the ground soaked with salt. I learned of other people who had rented Hill House and found that none of them had stayed more than a few days, certainly never the full terms of their leases, giving reasons that range from the dampness of the location, not at all true by the way, the house is very dry, to a pressing need to move elsewhere for business reasons. That is, every tenant who has left Hill House hastily has made an effort to supply a rational reason for leaving, and yet every one of them has left. I tried, of course, to learn more from these former tenants, and yet in no case could I persuade them to discuss the house. They all seemed most unwilling to give me information, and were in fact reluctant to recall the details of their several stays. In only one opinion were they united. Without exception, every person who has spent any length of time in this house urged me to stay as far away from it as possible. Not one of the former tenants could bring himself to admit that Hill House was haunted, but when I visited Hillsdale and looked up the newspaper records... Newspapers? Theodore asked. Was there a scandal? Oh yes, the doctor said. A perfectly splendid scandal with a suicide and madness and lawsuits. Then I learned that the local people had no doubts about the house. I heard a dozen different stories, of course. It is really unbelievably difficult to get accurate information about a haunted house. It would astonish you to know what I have gone through to learn only as much as I have, and as a result, I went to Mrs. Sanderson, Luke's aunt, and arranged to rent Hill House. She was most frank about its undesirability. It's harder to burn down a house than you think, he said. But agreed to allow me a short lease to carry out my researches on condition that a member of the family be one of my party. They hope, Luke said solemnly, that I will dissuade you from digging up the lovely old scandals. There. Now I have explained how I happen to be here and why Luke has come. As for you two ladies, we all know by now that you are here because I wrote you and you accepted my invitation. I hope that each of you might, in her own way, intensify the forces at work in the house. Theodora has shown herself possessed of some telepathic ability, and Eleanor has in the past been intimately involved.
The Haunting of Hill House. You said they were sensitive.
Of course. The doctor looked at her curiously. Many years ago, when you were a child, the Stones. Eleanor frowned and shook her head. Her fingers trembled around the stem of her glass, and then she said, "That was the neighbours. My mother said the neighbours did that. People are always jealous." "Perhaps so." The doctor spoke quietly and smiled at Eleanor. "The incident has been forgotten long ago, of course. I only mention it because that is why I wanted you in Hill House." "When I was a child," Theodora said lazily, "many years ago, doctor, as you put it so tactfully, I was whipped for throwing a brick through a greenhouse roof. I remember I thought about it for a long time, remembering the whipping, but remembering also the lovely crash after thinking about it very very seriously, I went out and did it again. I don't remember very well, Eleanor said uncertainly to the doctor. But why? Theodora asked. I mean, I can accept that Hill House is supposed to be haunted. You want us here, Dr. Montague, to help keep track of what happens, and I don't besides that you wouldn't at all like being here alone. But I just don't understand. It's a horrible old house, and if I rented it, I'd scream for my money back after one last look at the front hall. But what's here? What really frightens people so? I will not put a name to what has no name, the doctor said. I don't know. They never even told me what was going on, Eleanor said urgently to the doctor. My mother said it was the neighbours. They were always against us because she wouldn't mix with them. My mother, Luke interrupted her slowly and deliberately. I think, he said, that what we all want is facts. Something we can understand and put together. First, the doctor said, I'm going to ask you all a question. Do you want to leave? Do you advise that we pack up now and leave Hill House to itself and never have anything more to do with it? He looked at Eleanor. Eleanor put her hands together tight. It is another chance to get away, she was thinking. She said no, and glanced with embarrassment at Theodora. I was kind of a baby inside me, she explained. I did let myself get frightened. She's not telling all the truth, Theodora said boldly. She wasn't any more frightened than I was. We scared each other to death over a rabbit. Horrible creatures, rabbits, said. The doctor laughed. I suppose we were all nervous this afternoon anyway. It is a rude shock to turn that corner and get a clear look at Hill House. I thought he was going to send the car into a tree, Luke said. I'm really very brave now, with a fire and company, Theodora said. I don't know if you wanted to. Eleanor had spoken before she realized what she was going to say, or what it was going to sound like to the others. She saw that they were staring at her, and laughed, and added lamely, Mrs. Dudley will never forgive us. She wondered if they really believed that was what she meant to say, and thought, perhaps it has us now, this house. Perhaps it will not let us go. Let us have a little more brandy, the doctor said, and I will tell you the story of Hill House. He returned to his classroom position before the fireplace and began slowly, as one giving an account of kings long dead and wars long done with. His voice was carefully unemotional. Hill House was built 80-odd years ago. It was built as a home for his family by a man named Hugh Crane. A country home where he hoped to see his children and grandchildren live in comfortable luxury, and where he fully expected to end his days in quiet. Unfortunately, Hill House was a sad house almost from the beginning. Hugh Crane's young wife died minutes before she first was to set eyes on the house, when the carriage bringing her here overturned in the driveway, and the lady was brought, lifeless, I believe is the phrase they use, into the home her husband had built for her. He was a sad and bitter man, Hugh Crane, left with 2 small daughters to bring up, but he did not leave Hill House. Children grew up here? Eleanor asked incredulously. The doctor smiled. The house is dry, as I said. There were no swamps to breed fevers. The country air was thought to be beneficial to them, and the house itself was regarded as luxurious. I have no doubt that 2 small children could play here, lonely perhaps, but not unhappy. I hope they went wading in the brook, Theodora said. She stared deeply into the fire. Poor little things. I hope someone let them run in that meadow and pick wild flowers. Their father married again, the doctor went on. Twice more, as a matter of fact. He seems to have been unlucky in his wives. The second, Mrs. Crane, died of a fall, although I've been unable to ascertain how or why. Her death seems to have been as tragically unexpected as her predecessors. The third, Mrs. Crane, died of what they used to call consumption, somewhere in Europe. There is, somewhere in the library, a collection of postcards sent to the 2 little girls left behind in Hill House from their father and their stepmother, travelling from one health resort to another. The little girls were left here with their governess until their stepmother's death. After that, Hugh Crane declared his intention of closing Hill House and remaining abroad, and his daughters were sent to live with a cousin of their mother's, and there they remained until they were grown up. I hope Mama's cousin was a little jollier than old Hugh. Still staring darkly into the fire. It's not nice to think of children growing up like mushrooms in the dark. They felt differently, the doctor said. The 2 sisters spent the rest of their lives quarrelling over Hill House. After all his high hopes of a dynasty centered here, Hugh Crane died somewhere in Europe shortly after his wife, and Hill House was left jointly to the two sisters, who must have been quite young ladies by then. The older sister had, at any rate, made her debut into society, and put up her hair and learned to drink champagne and carry a fan. Hill House was empty for a number of years, but kept always in readiness for the family. At first in expectation of Hugh Crane's return, and then, after his death, for either of the sisters who chose to live there. Somewhere during this time it was apparently agreed between the two sisters that Hill House should become the property of the older. The younger sister had married. Aha, Theodora said. The younger sister stole her sister's beau, I've no doubt. It was said that the older sister was crossed in love, the doctor agreed, although that is said of almost any lady who prefers, for whatever reason, to live alone. At any rate, it was the older sister who came back here to live. She seems to have resembled her father strongly. She lived here alone for a number of years, almost in seclusion, although the village of Hillsvale knew her. Incredible as it may sound to you, she genuinely loved Hill House and looked upon it as her family home. She eventually took a girl from the village to live with her as a kind of companion. So far as I can learn, there seems to have been no strong feeling among the villagers about the house then, since Miss Crane, as she was inevitably known, hired her servants in the village, and it was thought a fine thing for her to take the village girl as a companion. Old Miss Crane was in constant disagreement with her sister over the house, the younger sister insisting that she had given up her claim on the house in exchange for a number of family heirlooms of considerable value, which her sister then refused to give her. There were some jewels, several pieces of antique furniture, and a set of gold wooden dishes, which seemed to irritate the younger sister more than anything else. Mrs. Sanderson let me rummage through a box of family papers, and so I've seen some of the letters Miss Crane received from her sister, and in all of them, those dishes stand out as the recurrent source of it. At any rate, the older sister died of pneumonia here in the house, with only the little companion to help her. There were stories later of a doctor called too late, a lady lying neglected upstairs while the younger woman
Getting back into daily practice after a long respite is tiring, but one must practice patience and perseverance. Early Bird Yoga, book a meditation session, yoga session online. Links will be in the description box. Hashtag Hetep Yoga Tribe. Reach out if you would like to have a special membership and special discounts. Rolling it out, launching our members only community in November, December, and January. Media, much love to all. Blessed be on your Wellness Wednesday.